Okay, I think that's our starter bell. What just happened? This is, if you've seen on the handouts, there are handouts back there if you want one. This is our final class in this quarter, which just seems bizarre to me. But we're going to do a devotional next Wednesday, the Wednesday night after Christmas, and then we'll be done for the year for Wednesday nights. So this is going to wrap it up. So tonight is about 3 lessons condensed into one. So we may be here till like 9:30, but whatever. As we've been talking about different aspects of fishing, this whole idea generates, of course, from Jesus telling his first apostles, those first followers, come follow me, and he'll do what? He'll make them what? Fishers of men. Now, as we've looked at all these, or several different analogies with fishing and some connections to make with fishing, we know that every seasoned, every practiced fisherman has the great story of the one that what? The one that got away. They all have this story about, I had this gigantic, huge one, and something happened. Wes just came to me right before class and said, I got a fish story. And I was hoping he was going to tell me about one that got away, but no, it was one that he caught that had all kinds of stuff inside it. But there's always this idea that, we hear it a lot of, I really had this one good one, but it got away, and so I've got these 4 or 5 regular fish. But what's funny is that sometimes fish have those stories too. I don't know if you've heard this before. I had to ask Kara if I should even share this or show this picture, but I want to read this brief news story to you from Sydney, Australia, because this is interesting. Lifeguards at a beach north of Sydney were stunned when a man walked into their post looking for help with a small shark attached to his leg. A small shark attached to his leg. Small shark, indeed, but a shark attached to his leg. Luke Trosaglovich, looks like. Luke Trosaglovich swam 1,000 feet to shore with the 2-foot shark biting his leg and, I'm sorry it's not funny, but refusing to let go. I just realized I had to swim in like that, hanging on to it. He was snorkeling on a reef off Caves Beach near Newcastle on Tuesday when a wobbegong, or carpet shark, attacked his leg. Now listen to this. This is the best part. This is his quote. Once I got to shore, a couple people tried to help me, but I could not remove it. It was just stuck there. So I got up into my car and drove to the clubhouse with a shark on his leg. Imagine if you're sitting in traffic, look over. Dude's got a shark on his leg. He drives. I drove to the clubhouse, and luckily the guys down there had a clue what to do. The lifeguard couldn't believe it. Basically, he asked the question, can you guys help me get this off? And this lifeguard's answer was, there's nothing in our procedure manual for that type of thing. I would imagine not. But they ended up flushing it with fresh water, and it ended up letting go. The guy had 70 holes in his leg. Little pinprick bite mark. I found another story, and I will not show you pictures of this guy. This was more recently, a guy in Florida that was snorkeling, and a nurse shark bit his stomach. Amelia's face. Yeah, bit him on the stomach and would not let go. And you look that up, there's video of all that, and it's horrible. But so even fish have their stories of the human that got away, They even have the one that got away story. But what about us? What about us as Christians, going back to this idea of being fishers of men? Are there neighbors or coworkers or family members that God wants you to go talk to? That you have an in with them that nobody else does because they're your family, they're the guy you've lived next door to for 20 years or whatever. Do we worry about the ones that are going to get away? Or do we think about those that we could be overlooking for whatever reason? And the question we have to ask is if we're aware, or if we can even come to grips with the idea that, yeah, we might be overlooking somebody, or we might have somebody around us that we're afraid might get away, we have to try and figure out what's getting in our way, what's obscuring our vision of going after that person. Because as we've said over and over throughout this quarter, Jesus said, I'm going to make you this. So to follow Jesus is to be fishers of men. To follow is to fish. So tonight we're going to look at kind of an obscure account from the Old Testament, but one I think you've probably heard before. And I think from it we can take a principle that we can really put into practice when we think of this idea of, well, as we've talked about the last couple of weeks, this idea of investing and inviting. And we'll look at this principle and apply it to this concept of investing and inviting. Let's bow together and have a prayer before we get started. God our Father, we thank you so much for today. We thank you for providing this time for us to be here together to fellowship with one another and to spend time in your word. God, I just thank you so much for this opportunity you've provided me to lead this class. Just thank you so much for this material, for the ideas and the thoughts that we've been able to share as we consider this idea of being fishers of men. God, I pray that you will open our eyes to those around us, open our hearts to the possibilities of reaching out to people. I pray that you will be with each student, each teacher here tonight. We pray that the time that we spend together in these classes will be beneficial to us. It will be encouraged and uplifted as we leave here tonight, and our time of devotional as well. But God, I pray above everything that we honor you with our words and our actions, and that we remember that you've called us to share your message with the world around us. Help us to be attentive. Help us to be open to what your word teaches. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. We talked last week about this idea of the fishing process, that it was never intended to be a solo thing, that we as the church, we have to work together. When one of us does that, goes to that effort of inviting someone, and as soon as they cross the threshold, then we're all involved in this fishing process. And we have to be aware of that. We have to be aware of how we deal with people, how we approach people, that the best way to introduce people to Jesus is to introduce them to a functioning body of his, which is us, the church. So we want our friends, we want our family, we want these people we invite to literally be able to come and see Jesus here and represented in us. So in this final session tonight, what we have to talk about is, I don't know what you'd call it, maybe the flip side of that, or I don't know, the next topic is what we'll call it. The fact that we as Christians sometimes have a dangerous tendency, have an ability, I don't know what word to use, this can happen, I guess, that we can find ourselves impairing this call to be fishers of men for each other and certainly for ourselves. In the joy that we have as members of the Lord's church, as great as it is, as exciting as it is, as great as it is to be a part of this particular body of the Lord's church, what we have to be aware of is that we can spend so much time enjoying the benefits of what it means to be in the church family that we forget that we have a job to do. That we can forget that God gave us something to do beyond enjoy the fellowship, beyond enjoy how great it is to be a body. That God has there's also this mission that God has asked us to be engaged in. And we have to be conscientious about that. So we're going to turn over, if you would, to 2 Kings chapter 7. And we're going to look at this Old Testament account. It has nothing to do with evangelism. But like I said, I think there's a principle that we can take from this account. Before we get into this text, let me ask you, why is it important to God Why is it important to God that we be fishers of men? Maybe I should have asked this the first class. Somebody said something? Because there's fish out there. What else? To save souls. Yeah. So as caught fish, we have to be aware of that principle. We'll get to that too. It's the only way by which people are saved. And really, I guess I could have asked it a little differently. Who else is going to do it if we don't? I mean, the city of Meridian is not going to organize a council to teach people the gospel. I mean, there's not. It's up to us. So when we think of this idea, well, keep that in mind, that this is the job that we've been given. Yes, we love the fellowship that we have. We love the time that we can spend together and enjoy that and be here to study together and to grow together spiritually. But we also have this responsibility. In 2 Kings chapter 7, the Syrian army, the Arameans, depending on your translation, has besieged the city of Samaria, the capital city of the northern kingdom. In about 900 BC, the kingdom split, the northern and southern kingdom. And it's at this point, under, I believe it's King Jehoram, the northern kingdom had just a bunch of terrible kings. They're in a spot now where they have just totally abandoned God. I mean, they've abandoned godly principles and everything else. And God told them through prophets, you're going to have enemies. They're going to come cause problems. Well, and now it's happening. And in 2 Kings chapter 7, what we'll see is, let's see. Well, if you were to look in chapter 6, what you'd see is the city has been besieged. If you don't know what that means, the city's been surrounded by the Syrian army, the Armenian army. They're not launching arrows over the walls. They're just surrounded. Nobody gets in, nobody gets out. What's going to happen then? You're going to run out of food. You're going to run out of electricity. No, you're not going to run out of electricity. But you're going to run out of food, and that's exactly what happens. And we see that the people resort to eating anything they can get their hands on. They're selling, this isn't the Bible, I'm not making this up. They're selling donkey heads to eat. And they're selling them for a ridiculous amount of money. They're selling dove dung. And people are eating, not the doves, dove waste. And like I said, it's Bible. They resort to cannibalism even. So things are really, really bad in the city. Well, let's pick up in verse 3. Now there are 4 men who were lepers at the entrance to the gate, and they said to one another, "Why are we sitting here until we die?" And I don't know if this is one of their other answers, but the next thing says, well, if we say, "Let us enter the city," the famine's in the city, and we'll die there. If we sit here, we're going to die also. So now come, let us go to the camp of the Syrians. If they spare our lives, we shall live. And this sentence is great. And if they kill us, we shall but die. Yeah, if they kill you, you die. So what are they're saying, look, we're lepers, we're 4 guys. We go in the city, we're going to die in there because everybody's going to starve to death. They probably won't eat us because we're lepers. But we're going to die in there too. If we sit out here, we're going to die. They say, let's go turn ourselves in to the Syrians. Now, could you picture that scene where these 4 lepers come up with a white flag, and the Syrian army's going, who are these guys? I mean, it's not like there's some sort of threatening band of 4 sick guys. But anyway, they say, let's go turn ourselves in, thinking maybe if the Syrians take us captive, we'll at least be fed. And he said, and then, if they kill us, we're dead anyway. 3 ways out of this thing, we're dead. So they arose at twilight to go to the camp of the Syrians. But when they came to the edge of the camp of the Syrians, behold, there was no one there, for the Lord had made the army of the Syrians hear the sound of chariots and of horses and the sound of a great army. And they said to one another, behold, the king of Israel has hired against us kings of the Hittites and the kings of Egypt to come against us. So they fled away in the twilight and abandoned their tents, their horses, and their donkeys, leaving the camp as it was, and fled for their lives. So these 4 lepers come over the hill and they go, what do they see? If you're a leper who probably hasn't been taken care of very well by the people in your city, there's a famine, everybody's starving, what do they see? Food. Let's go. I mean, and this would be, I mean, the army got up and just left immediately. So everything, I mean, there might still be fires going, you know, campfires with food cooking or what. So they're like, look at this. This is like well, it was a miracle. But it was like a gift. It was like, yeah, they walked into Golden Corral and it was abandoned, but the food was all there. So they can't believe what they're seeing. And when the lepers, verse 8, and when these lepers came to the edge of the camp, they went into a tent and ate and drank. I bet they did. And they carried off silver and gold and clothing and went and hid them. And then they came back and entered another tent and carried off things from it and went and hid them. So they're just plundering this thing by themselves. Could you imagine what it's like for these guys who aren't even treated well by their own people? They're walking in tents going, I'll take that shirt, those pair of pants, I want that. And they just take it and they hide it. And for a while, I imagine they're just rolling in it, eating everything they can find, storing up stuff, and they're just stoked that they've got this chance. But here's where the story turns. You probably know what happens here. But if you're watching this as a movie or something, you're at this point going to be going, all right, good for those guys, kind of. And then it's going to be like, wait, there's all kinds of stuff there. What should these guys do? Verse 9, then they said to one another, somebody has a guilty conscience. We're not doing right. This is a day of good news. If we're silent and wait until morning light, punishment will overtake us. Now therefore come, let us go and tell the king's household. Now they go and tell the king. The king doesn't believe them at first. But if you're new to this account, you might have been at some point, if you're reading through this, going, okay, cool, they got some food finally, but surely they're not going to just hoard. What are their options? I mean, for one thing, these guys are lepers in a famine. There's probably nothing worse than you could be on earth than a leper kicked outside of a besieged city with no food. Nobody can help you. So when you think of their options, they say we can go turn ourselves, or we can stay outside the city and die, go inside the city and die, go turn ourselves in and see what happens. All their options are bad at this point. I mean, there's really not a good place for them to be. But once they find the camp, then what are their options? Number one, they could just do exactly what it seems like they can just hoard everything they want. They can take all this stuff. These guys could be rich. They could be well fed for who knows how long, but then they're taking all this treasure and burying it out in the desert or wherever they're doing. And then eventually they're going to have all this stuff. What they could have done is just said, well, you know, those people in the city, those people have treated us terrible forever. You know, maybe one of those people will get smart and come walking out of the city to go try and find something. It's not up to us to tell them. I mean, those people don't like us anyway. It's not up to us to go share what just happened here. They have this moment, though, where they say, you know, if we don't share this, it sounds like their first motivation was punishment's going to fall. I don't know if they're referring to God's going to punish them or somebody's going to find out that they knew and punish. I don't know what that necessarily is suggesting. But look again at what they say. Middle of verse 9, this is a day of good news. If we're silent till morning light, punishment will overtake us. Now, therefore, come and let us go and tell the king's household. This is a day of good news. Ultimately, they went back because it was the right thing to do. Because they said that we're not doing right. That the right thing, of course those people have treated us poorly. Of course we're outcasts. But those people are dying in there. And we've found a situation that could feed a lot of people. And at this point, you know, they've got to be stuffed. They've been eating for who knows how long. But finally they say, you know, we can't do this. It wasn't right to keep that blessing to themselves. They were happy. I mean, they got to the camp. They got comfortable. They were sitting there eating. Everything was good for them. If you just froze that moment, they're in a good spot. But one of them goes, this isn't right. We can't keep this news to ourselves. Even though things are better for us right now than they've been in a long time, we have to share this. Now, again, this is not a story, this is not an account about evangelism, obviously. But there's an undeniable principle there. What is it? The message of the good news, and what about it? We got to share it. It is not right for us to keep it to ourselves. Even if, in their situation, things were good where they were. And yes, those people had been, as lepers, you can't look at them, you can't touch, they have to call out, unclean, unclean. So, you almost can't blame them at first. You kind of go, I don't know what I'd do. But one of them says, it's just not right. That this is a day of good news. I stole this from somebody else. In simplest terms, the way you could describe this situation is, with great blessings come great responsibility. And I looked, I thought, I'm going to see if I can find that quote. And I found this quote. I feel that I'm very blessed, but with great blessings come great responsibility. Oh, it's like the guy's talking about this story. I don't think so. It's Kanye. I thought that was kind of wild that I'm using a Kanye illustration, but his statement is right, and it so applies to what these guys, these four lepers experience. That they realize that they've been given they've been blessed in a giant way, so they have got to share that. Now, and again, the parallels for us are so obvious. When we think of the ways that God, through His grace and through His mercy, has blessed us individually, just me, our own forgiveness, the blessings that have come to each of us. It isn't right for me to keep that to myself. But then you think about us as a congregation. I think I've said this a lot lately. This congregation has it so good. Our problems that we're dealing with right now is that we're getting too big. Man, that's awful. You don't know how many bodies of the Lord's church across the nation, across the world would love to deal with the issues that we're dealing with. So we're happy. Things are going well with us. And it's sometimes easy to go, well, look, let's just take care of business here and things will keep going. We can't, to steal their words, it wouldn't be right to not share what a day of good news that this is. So we have to remember that the right thing for us to do from wherever we came from to come to Christ, just like these guys, the right thing to do is to go back and tell other people about it. Now, but we've talked about this some. We're just going to kind of recap this a little bit. What are our reasons for not doing that? I think the most common reason is we just say, I don't really know enough. What if somebody asks me hard questions? One of the other lessons in this series that we're not going to be able to do is the title was Muddy Waters. That it's really hard to fish when you get in water that isn't very clear, that isn't very clean. It's a mess, But the fact is, if you see a dirty pond, it's really not usually the water per se that's dirty. It's the junk floating around in the water. And you get a glass of water out of a pond or whatever, and you sit and the kind of sediment will fall down. It's the stuff in the water that messes up the water. We have a tendency to shy away from sharing our faith because of that, because there's so much other stuff, and we get concerned. What if somebody asks me about, why do we take the Lord's Supper every Sunday? What if somebody asks me? I know why. I know why I believe that, but I've never really had to put it into words. I know why I believe baptism is the right way to get into Christ, but I'm not sure I could really put that into words. And then we have the idea of, well, what if they have some beliefs that they say, well, I've always believed this. And you go, I don't know how to answer that. It's the idea of fishing. That if you catch a fish and you're in weeds and in reeds and stuff, it's hard to reel the thing in because it has to go through all the stuff and you get your line tangled up and stuff. So we sometimes have that notion that I don't know enough. And we've talked about this in this quarter. But we can't make the message too complex. You know, tell your story. You know, we talked about the man formerly known as the blind man, who says, you know, I don't know what happened. I don't know what you guys think about who this guy is. I just know I was blind, now I see. I mean, that's our story in a nutshell. You know, I was lost. I opened my Bible. I found that, you know, God, through His great mercy, offered a way for me to be saved. And all He asked me to do is be immersed in water and come up and live a new life. So I found it in here and I did it. And it's been really cool ever since. That's the gospel presentation. I mean, yes, and hear me say this. We have to deal with we have to teach the whole counsel. We have to do that. But at first, to get somebody connected to Christ, we just need to tell them how we got here. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to have all the answers on the spot that minute. Tell somebody what Jesus did for you, what he did for your life. And if they, I mean, like I said, we talked last week or the week before about the Great Commission. Jesus says the words in this order: go make followers, go make disciples. Go first, then go make disciples, baptize it, get them in a right relationship with God, and then teach them all the stuff that they need to know. I mean, it's just that, I mean, that's still a Richard expression. It's just that simple, but it's just that hard. But we don't have to make it any harder. We don't have to make it harder than it is. Tell people what Jesus did for your life. That's the thing that we dodge the most because it's like, well, I just don't know enough. Steve.
Brother, I'm sure a lot of us about help. I really see people that are doing well financially.
Mm-hmm.
Just like with the lepers and the blind man, what great joy they had.
Yeah.
Right? Boy, why? That's what gets me. It's the joy of the Lord.
Yeah.
And it's when we're here, see the joy of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what takes me. It doesn't need to live.
Yeah. Yeah, what Steve's saying is you think of the joy that we have in Christ, the fact that you can wake up every day and know you're forgiven and you have a church family. And again, you think of these lepers. At some point, one of them went, man, think how great everybody in town how happy everybody would be if we take them out and show them this. So, I mean, it's just that principle. Think of the joy that the world needs so badly. And if we can just connect them with, here's who Jesus is to me. And if they ask hard questions, say, you know, even if you don't know, say, I don't know that right now. Let me tell you about Jesus. And then come and meet Jesus' body. And somebody there can help us answer this question.
What I've learned is
Yeah.
let me find out the answer. And that's how I've learned.
Yeah. Yeah, what April's saying is that even in business, you know, and I'm sure a lot of you all have heard this, that, you know, they even teach courses. If somebody asks you a question you don't know, you say, that's a really great question. Let me figure out the answer for that. And I mean, we can do the same thing with our faith. If there's a question we don't know, fine, but just let people know, here's what Jesus has done for my life. Here's what God's done for my life. Okay, so that's our first, and I think that's probably the primary obstacle, that at least the one that comes to mind, that we're not sure we know enough. But now let's go back to what I kind of alluded to at the beginning, that sometimes we have to admit that we just get comfortable. That it's really great. It's really great to be with this body. It's really great. You know, one of my favorite things every year is our lectureship. Because I'm just getting, fed so much great stuff, and I'm with, great Christian people, and it's just one of those things that it's so good. But we have to think about the fact that the reason we come together, the reason we're here to be encouraged, is what are we encouraged to do? Go out there. To make it week to week. And it's one of the things that you hear a lot in the religious world or in religious stuff is, my faith is very personal to me. My faith is very private. That is so not biblical. Your faith should be very public. Aren't we glad that those first followers of Jesus didn't go, well, I believe that Jesus is the Messiah, and I believe He's the Son of God, and I believe He started this whole church and all this stuff, but I don't think we should tell anybody because I'm going to keep it's private to me. I mean, the Bible would have ended, at Acts chapter 2, wouldn't even got there. Because we should be thankful that those guys were willing to be very public about it. So when we think about those lepers and think about how comfortable they could have, or how comfortable they had to be. When they get in this camp, they're sleeping in beds, they're in tents, they've got food, they're sitting there, and they're living it up, and they're hiding stuff out in the desert or whatever they're doing. But at one point, they realized we can't just sit here and be content. We can't just stay comfortable right here. And again, the phrase that they use is just not right to not share this good news.
They get all the loot. I would have thought that
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
they were fearful of coming out because that, but the oppressor, we know the oppressor is.
Yeah. What Steve said is, you'd think that one of them would at least say, we're obligated to go back and just tell the people in Samaria that the army's gone. We don't have to tell them anything else. But really, that's such a great parallel too. What you go further on what Steve said. Sometimes I think we have think of those lepers. What they could have thought is, those people in that city, they're right over there. They could walk out here and see the camp's empty. Why do I have to go tell them? And we sometimes think the same thing. Our doors are open every Sunday, twice. People drive by. They should drive right in. They should come in and see. And we want to invite them to do that. But those lepers said, no, we need to go back. So that's our question is, what are we doing, with the gospel? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what Wes said is even when they go back, their message isn't received immediately. Like I said, the king didn't believe him. He thought, the Syrians are hiding somewhere. But the lepers had to be consistent. Again, such a connecting principle for us. So our question is, what are we going to do? What are we doing with our good news? Are we going back to those people that we know are outside of Christ? And are we sharing the good message, the good news with them? And if that becomes our priority, at some point, those lepers went from comfortable and content to had a little stirring, and then went, our priority's got to go back and help save our people. Even people that have been jerks to them or whatever. So let's think, if that becomes our priority, if this idea of being fishers for men becomes our priority, how is it going to change our schedule? How is it going to change how we do things in life? How is it going to change who we go to lunch with? How is it going to change who we have over to our houses? Now, and again, I'm as bad as any of you, if not worse. I mean, I have next to no non-Christian friends. I'm around you people all the time. I mean, I'm serious. I work, people talk about how terrible it is at work. It's not that bad for me most of the time. But What it's easy for me to get to where I could focus 50, 60 hours a week, all my waking hours, I could focus on the work of this congregation. And that would mean that, the care groups would run right, everything that I'm involved in would work right, and you guys would think I'm doing a great job. But if I'm not carving out time to fish for men, I'm not doing my job. So how would making that commitment change who we go? We want to go to lunch with our friends. We want to spend. When I think of having downtime, I immediately think I'm going to spend time with my family or with you people. And that's how it goes. So we have to realize that we need this fellowship, but we also have to take this. It's not right for us to not share this good thing that we have. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it seems like that's what triggered them, that there was something in their conscience that went, we got to show some care for those. That's what Jeremy was saying, that there was an obvious concern for their fellow man. And how much greater is that for us? We make fishing for men our priority. How's it going to change us financially? We've talked about that. Richard's preached about that the last few weeks. How's it going to change how we prioritize, how we spend our money, how we spend our time? Yes, we want to be together. We want to do stuff with us, but we have to remember that we can't stay comfortable just among ourselves. That our objective is, I'd say twofold, but it's severalfold. Yes, we need to edify and encourage each other, but we can't keep the message in here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to hurry real fast here. So what does it come down to for us? It comes down to the same thing we talked about last week, that we have to be people who are willing to invest in other people and invite them. 1 John 4:9, real fast, is just a great verse about this very idea. In this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God did what? What's the next word? God sent. God invested in us by sending part of himself. That God sent, where'd he go? That God sent his only Son into the world that we might live through him. God did it first. God is the originator of investing and inviting. He invested in us, and he invites us into this relationship. I hope we grow. I hope our care groups become what we've kind of envisioned for them for the last several years, where they're an entry point for new visitors, where there are all these different things. I hope our youth group grows. We're excited about the youth minister idea. But above everything else, I hope we become fishers of men. And let's think back to those guys I talked about at the very beginning. Kind of gross stories, kind of weird stories. Guy get bit by a shark, can't get the shark off. But let's think about that. When we think of this idea of God using us in our lives, using us wherever we are in life to be those people who are going to be fishers of men, of all the bait in that tackle box. There's all kinds of different colors, all kinds of different things. That's us. And what we want is those fish out there to latch on to us and not let go. And we're the best bait God, in fact, we're the only bait God has. And God has us out there, and He asks us to do this job that no one else can do. Jesus said, "Come follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." And we have to remember that that's what it comes down to us. For us, is that to follow is to fish. Yeah, but Linda just said that one of the hardest hymns we have to sing is "You Never Mentioned Him to Me." Maybe that's why we don't sing it very much. Okay, I hope this has been some benefit for you. This has been a very encouraging class for me. I hope you got this much of what I got out of it. But thanks so much for your attention, your comments through the quarter, and